Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pro Football Storing Channel. I'm your host, Flynn Given. Today, we will be discussing the Jacksonville Jaguars and their season, their 2021 season, and then also go into maybe some draft needs and the future of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're the number one pick. They have the worst record this year in the NFL, so that's what I'm going to start off. We're going to go through every single team this offseason, and let's start it. Obviously, this team doesn't have their head coach decided yet. Um, I won't speculate who it might be, so it's going to be hard to kind of break down where they could be possibly going. But we know some of the key pieces on this team, at least, with like Trevor Lawrence. And you would think, we can look at the picks, like Travis Etienne, probably going to be more involved. Obviously, he didn't play this year, really, other than the preseason. Tyson Campbell, you would think he's going to be either the number two or number one corner. Maybe Walker Little, becomes a decent tackle. We'll have to see all this play out. Let's go, though. Before the season, we didn't think this is a very good team. But we thought the Houston Texans possibly were maybe the worst team in the NFL. This is the game I actually picked the Texans to win. And if we go to the game and look at it again, this is the game that was completely controlled by the Texans. They jump out 14-0. Then I believe it was 20-7. And Texans score more after, end of the quarter with a Danny Amendola touchdown catch. And this was just a complete blowout, which you can say a lot of the games were kind of like this. Texans controlled, they dominated. Trevor Lawrence threw 3 interceptions, I believe, in this game. And 3 touchdowns. This is about an average day for Trevor Lawrence on the season. A 70 quarterback rating at about 71 when he on the season as a whole. Let's go to week 2. Denver, they obviously lost this game. A little bit closer in score. The game, the Jaguars jump out. And the Broncos basically score the rest of the game other than a kick return by Agnew. So, again, a game, Denver's not a team with a great offense, so they kind of keep games pretty close. And you could say for this game, it was 23-7, I think. So, not very competitive, normal game pretty much for the Jags at this point. And Lawrence threw 2 interceptions and did not have a good day. Another thing is odd about this team, they didn't really run the ball too well. If you look on, you would think with James Robinson, he had a pretty good rookie year. And it was nothing close to that. And I know there's been other issues and then the injury at the end of the year. This is this thing to look back at. Game in Arizona. We didn't realize how good Arizona possibly would be. At this point, they were 2-0, obviously. But this is the game, the Jags really only were in the game because of the 109-yard field goal return because it was a short field goal by Prater for the half, which allowed the Jags to be up. And then they got up, 19-10 at one point, and then the Arizona just controlled the rest of the game after that. And there was a pick 6, I think Lawrence threw in this game from memory. It was just not another great show. And the defense, it was actually Kyler Murray didn't have a great day either. But I guess he did. He was just really the 1 interception and a touchdown. He completed 28-34. Defensively, this team needs a little bit more star power, but we'll get into a game where they eventually upset a team because, they only have, 3 wins in the year. All their games are upsets that they win, just to be honest. Now, looking back at this game, you're like, wow, a team that was in the Super Bowl, they just only lost by 3. They got up 14-0 at half. And this is the Bengals coming off a loss to the Bears. No, actually, sorry, it's 2 weeks after that. This is like the up and down Bengals. They weren't what they are now. Obviously, they eventually scored 2 touchdowns, tied it up, and then Jags got a lead. They tied it up, and a last-second field goal to win the game. So the game that Jags could have won, and it shows you how close a lot of the teams in the NFL are. Team in the Super Bowl right now, you know, squeaking out a victory against the worst team in the NFL. And it's just how it is, with some teams, and basically the NFL, honestly. The Titans now, better team. Titans dominated this game. Um, Really, all I could say, we can look at the quarterback stats. No, didn't really do much. You can look at all these quarterbacks; they all performed pretty well against the Jags defense. And Lawrence, not his worst day, but you know, and they actually ran the ball pretty well. So even with 150 plus rushing yards, it looked like still couldn't put up more than 20 points. Only having 19. Now here's the first win. It's in London. This is the first win since week 1 of 2019, which was against the Colts, and that was in Jacksonville. This is in London. This was it's a competitive game both ways. And Jacksonville kicks the field goal at the very end, and Tua threw a pretty dumb interception. It was really just a bad throw, I guess. And this might have been, I don't know if you want to say Lauren's best game, but it was one of his better games. And then turn it over. Another thing you could say about Lawrence, he just needs to improve his pocket presence. You see multiple times this year, he just doesn't stand in the pocket and throw great intermediate passes. It's more like a lot of scrambling. He came from a college type offense, so it's not surprising. Just that's the one thing he really needs to improve on going on the next year. Now they had a bye week after week 6. He went to Seattle. This game was completely dominated. Seahawks. Remember, Jacksonville scored at the very end. Could have been a shutout. I don't know what the stats were, but we'll look at that. Lawrence with interception, and Geno Smith 4 incompletions. Another thing, they just didn't force a lot of incompletions, and Geno Smith also had a rushing touchdown. Moving on, we're just going to do these very quick. We're not going to do a normal breakdown of each game. Here was one of the biggest upsets of the year. A 9-6 victory. I don't know why I went to the Titans game. 9-6 victory over the Bills. And this was kind of the start of the Bills' awful stretch. The worst stretch of the season, I should say, not an awful stretch. Josh Allen, 2 interceptions, no touchdown. Might have been his worst game of his career, you could say. Trevor did what he needed to. CJ Beathard threw, I think, maybe his only 2 passes in the game of the year, I should say. In this game, didn't have a lot rushing. Hyde with 67 yards on 21 carries. But this was the Josh Allen against Josh Allen kind of game. A bunch of sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles. You can look at interception, 11 yards, pass deflection, a sack, 8 tackles, forced fumble. One of those historical games in terms of guys in the same name and, putting up some numbers against each other. More of the Jacksonville's Josh Allen, not the Bills. But there's a game they lost, a competitive game against Colts, which we'll talk about the second matchup against Colts later in the video. But it was back and forth. Colts kind of jumped out. They just they couldn't put the Jacksonville away. And then this was a game that Taylor did decently well. Wasn't like a crazy breakout game. It was fire out the carry kind of game. And Wentz, didn't perform all too well. And Lawrence couldn't get much going in the passing game. Again, was relatively competitive. Both teams could have won this game. The Colts won it though. And then they went to San Francisco. This was another game they got dominated. Team that was in the NFC Championship game. This is kind of the Deebo Samuel running back kind of game where they first used him heavily in the running game, lining up in the backfield, and they really caught the Jags off guard. Was it a touchdown from Deebo, almost 10 yards to carry, and a bunch of carries from other players. Garoppolo played fairly well. Didn't really ask too much from him, and Lawrence didn't turn the ball over really, but couldn't get much going again. And the whole entire offense, we think that's what the Jags' focus is this offseason, is to improve that offensive line, the receivers, the running backs. I wouldn't say any of them are really bad on the offensive line. Running back wise, they're fine. They're getting ETN back. They could probably work with that. Receiver wise, they're fairly okay. I think they need to get a number one, but they have a bunch of guys that are number 2 and 3s that are NFL quality receivers. Getting a team in Atlanta. Game Jacksonville was could have won, but Atlanta would look like the better team. And they were the better team. Not by a lot, but again, another game. It wasn't Jacksonville's worst game, but Atlanta doesn't have much star power. Roster-wise, they're pretty similar. I think Atlanta's a little bit better. Plus, they have the quarterback difference. Matt Ryan right now has been a better quarterback than what Lawrence showed this year. Doesn't mean Lawrence can't improve. I think he will. Now here's a game against another team in the Super Bowl. Weren't really competitive at all. They scored a touchdown, but to make it 7-10, but then did nothing after that. And the passing game, Stafford is one of his best games this year. What's the stat line? It was 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. They ran the ball well. Sonny Michel, 121 yards. And this came off of, the Rams off a pretty bad stretch, the worst stretch of the season. And it was like a get-right game for them. No, back to Tennessee. They got shut out. And again, don't know why I did that. But, they got shut out. Tennessee didn't really need to do much. They didn't turn the ball over. They just controlled it. Didn't run the ball very well, but didn't really get a lot of yards. They just relied on the defense, and Lawrence struggled. This is a 4-interception game. First of his career. Probably the worst game of the year for Lawrence. And Tennessee, went to the playoffs, so this is the team they're going to see twice a year, so they're going to have to figure out ways to get better and get close to their level. Now, another game against the Houston Texans. Team, maybe this game you're like, oh, maybe they'll beat this team. They lost them once. Play them twice. Texans are playing Davis Mills. No, what happened? Davis Mills took them apart pretty much. It was an amazing day, but 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 209 yards on 19 completions, 11 incompletions. They didn't really run the ball, the Texans, very well, but, Mills did what he needed to. And Jacksonville struggled. Another game where this is a bad stretch where it was like almost 8 games in a row or something where Lawrence didn't throw a touchdown pass. Basically the worst offense in the NFL over the whole season. And until maybe the very end, you could argue the Panthers were involved, maybe the Giants. But overall, the whole season, Jacksonville was arguably the worst offense in the league. Now against the Jets, game they could have won. Surprising that the Jets compete with the Bucs the next week, when or maybe 2 weeks after this. Either way, this was the first overall pick versus the second overall pick kind of matchup. And quarterbacks, Lawrence didn't do a lot. Threw for 280 yards against a favorable defense in the passing game to take apart And Zach Wilson, had 91 yards rushing. They also had a bunch of, they had 200 yards rushing, 250 pretty much in this game, the Jets, so they didn't need a lot from Zach Wilson. Didn't turn it over and came down to the last play. And the Jets held on. I think the Jets are a better team. I thought they were going to win this game. They did. But, they at least were competitive, the Jags. They went to New England, and this was not competitive. I think this was so it was 50-3 at one point, and then became 50-10 at that. I don't really need to talk about this game too much. Complete domination by the Jags. Lawrence threw a garbage touchdown, 3 interceptions. Mac Jones took apart this team, and Hoyer went in, threw 4 passes, 3 completions. I guess Jacksonville didn't too bad against the run, but they couldn't run the ball. Didn't really try to run the ball. They were down so quickly, and they just put it all on Lawrence. Lawrence did have a really good scramble throw on the right sideline, I remember, in this game, which one of his better plays this year. Now, against the Colts in Week 18, complete one of the biggest upsets of the year. They've now won basically every time they've been home against the Indianapolis Colts. The last 7 or so years, they've won. They did the stretch when the Colts had everything to play for, playoffs, all that, and the Jags had, man, they lost. They guaranteed them the number 1 pick, but they won. But the thing is, the Lions won, so they kept the number 1 pick. They dominated this game, to be honest. Wentz couldn't get much going, struggled. The fumble and the interception later in the game just really killed the momentum that Colts maybe could have got. Well, between Lawrence, 2 touchdowns. This, you could say, one of the best games, if not his best. 111 quarterback rating. Jacksonville ran okay, but the Jags just focused Jonathan Taylor. Still 5 yards to carry. They should have ran the ball more, the Colts, but that's another story for another day. And best win of the year, pretty much. Ending the season on a high note, or higher note than, obviously they lost. But they beat teams like the Bills and Colts, which one obviously playoff team. The other one was they knocked out of the playoffs. And then they beat Miami, who went on down on a winning streak at the end of the season. You could see 12 touchdowns, 70 interceptions, under 60%. Wasn't good. Didn't get sacked as much you would think with that offensive line. Just, again, needs a little bit more pocket presence, needs to, learn how to read defenses and learn, how to throw, read the defense and read the middle of the field, really. He didn't throw a lot in the middle of the field this year. But again, we don't know who the coaches are going to be. We have an idea who their players are going to be. Chenault, I think, is a good slot receiver. I think they could throw more screens and stuff and give him the ball a little bit more. But he did have an injury in the season. Average under 10 yards a catch. But if you look at these receivers, most of them average under 10 yards. We just were sorted by receptions. Marvin Jones was their number 1, most target player. And then they got Treadwell, former first-round pick, a bust, you would say. Having is one of his better years, even with 33 catches. James Robinson led the team in rushing, but wasn't great. And, another former pretty good back in Carlos Hyde, 31 years old. Didn't get the ball a lot, didn't do much. None of the backs averaged 5 yards to carry other than Armstead, who didn't get a lot of work. Agnew, more of a gadget receiver, kick return upon return. Actually, had 16 yards of a rush. Basically because he had a 66-yarder in there. But, again, that's a player they can maybe get the ball to. It wasn't used a ton in Detroit, but, he did fairly well when he got the ball in Jacksonville. Offensively, need more sack production from the players they have, and also maybe they need to look at drafting someone helps Josh Allen out because not that sacks are everything. It's just the leading sacker 7.5. That's not that great, especially when he played most of the year. Remember, and then didn't have any defensive touchdowns, and their leading interceptor was their rookie Tyson Campbell. No one had more than 2 picks, and they only had 7 interceptions all year. And no Lawrence, and look, you just see all this is all their touchdowns right here, all on one page. I can show you right there. The opponent's touchdown, you can see how much more that. That's like double the length. Anyway, let's go into again. Let's talk about the players they drafted. I don't know if any of these guys are going to be big contributors. Like maybe they get a chance at Tufele. I don't think Jordan Smith's going to do a lot. Maybe Luke Farrell becomes a role player for them. Again, really hard to say with these picks. Cisco, you'd think he'd be starting safety or at least contributor on defense. Walker, you hope he becomes full-time starter and becomes a good player because you kind of need it with the offensive line you have now. And then you think Etienne and Lawrence together next year is going to be pretty good if they get the right pieces around them. And Tyson Campbell looks like a starting corner. Again, don't know the coaches. Still figuring that out. Tread Balky is the GM. And he did form a good team in San Francisco not that long ago. Been around near the Jags, though, recently and hasn't done too well. So if you look at the roster, they're going to get DJ Chark back, which should help them. That is their number one, I guess you could say right now. The lower end number one. I should go who's them either free. And again, Cam Robinson, that's the starting tackle. Hasn't played great, but playing a little bit better. And don't have a tight end presence. Shaughnessy was kind of the starting tight end, but Anders is a blocking tight end, Hollister. So a lot of work there. Receiver wise, I would think you get one more piece, one good piece. Second round, first round. Should help them. Running back, I think they can stay with pretty much with James Robinson coming back and also Etienne. Offensive line again needs improvement. Juwan Taylor's another tackle. They got 3 tackles that could be players, but none of them have really shown they're the guy. And they also, Andrew Norwell, decent guard at this point. And they don't, they just need more offensive line depth and help. The defensive line, Malcolm Brown, decent run stopper. Nothing really crazy here. Robertson Harris has been a decent player for the Bears and Jags this year. Again, more help there. Kind of like the offensive line. I don't know if any superstars are there, but if you can maybe add to it, maybe it'll be a good group. Linebacker-wise, they just have really Miles Jack, you could say. Some of the guys that you think maybe they can be decent second linebackers, third linebackers on the roster, but nothing I could say you need to keep this guy. Other Miles Jack. Corner-wise, you paid Shaquille Griffin. I wouldn't probably pay them that much, but they did that. And they're going to have him and Campbell, you would think, on the outside. And is Neville Lawson going to be their nickel corner still? I think they can improve on it, but I don't think it's a necessity they have to. Punter-wise, we'll see who they're going to have. They have Scott and they have Charlton. Matthew Wright, kicker-wise, I think they could improve. But again, that's special teams. You don't need to get into that too much. And let's go into some of the mock drafts. So obviously, a lot of people are saying Thibodeaux or Hutchinson or Evan Neal. Most people are saying Evan Neal is going to be the pick. Jaguars are first, so if you want to get an edge rusher, you can. to need an offensive line, which is probably where I would go because I would think you want to make sure your number one asset in Trevor Lawrence is as best as possible he can be, and then getting an offensive lineman would help him the most. In the first round, I don't believe they have any other picks, and they don't. So, a long way until the second round. And I believe that's it. I really appreciate you watching. Let's go into some of the news. I know it's not Jaguars related, but favorite for the Vikings EC job is Mike Pettin. Still looking for Bettles and expected to say retire. I'm not surprised. I'm proud. I guess this just came out today. Jaguars new Doug Pederson looks like he's got this job. Go down to make sure. So yeah, they are going to hire him. I thought that would have been their guy after they didn't get Byron Leftwich. So it's Doug Pederson. I think that's a good fit. Former quarterback, lives in that area. Yeah, he's had Wentz. He got him to pretty good heights, but obviously it went down a bit during the end. So you think he's going to do all he can to help the young quarterback. They're going to be tied for the next, you would think, few years. And rocky year with Urban Meyer head coach. Can't get much worse. Now you got Super Bowl champion and Doug Pederson. So I don't know if he's going to bring some Eagles to this team. That's potential that could happen. Obviously, he was out of football this year. So at least we know who the offensive coordinator is. I mean, he's going to call the plays, I would assume. So I think it's a decent fit. Jags, so I apologize earlier not knowing the coaches. It's going to be Doug Pederson. Let's make sure we go through all the news. It's nothing else. So, again, I appreciate you listening. It's been a little bit longer video. We want to keep these under about 30 minutes, these reviews, really quick, get to the point. Again, a lot's going to happen. A lot of free agents, a lot of people getting cut, a lot of people getting traded. A lot of things going to happen before the draft, at least, or free agency even. So, again, we'll go to the Detroit Lions next week and then preview the Super Bowl matchup. And that's will be the videos next week. And then we'll review it, obviously, the Super Bowl after that week. That's just a little roadmap, I guess you can call it, for what we're going to have on this channel. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.